Hello and welcome. I'm Annette Reeder from thebiblicalnutritionist.com. And today we're talking about cortisol. When cortisol is out of balance, your whole life is out of balance, but you may not even know it until you hit a critical point in your life and everything falls apart. And we're talking about stress. We're talking about adrenal fatigue. We're talking about hormonal imbalance. It can all come down to cortisol. Well, for this topic today, I've invited Dr. Shawn Talbot to join us because he's such a wealth of knowledge and just really good information in bite-sized pieces that we can all take and just learn and apply. Well, I know one of the most important topics in people's life, whether they know it or not, it's actually cortisol, because cortisol is a word that once you understand what it does, you can't get enough information about it because it's like, I finally narrowed down my problem. It's cortisol. No matter what age you are, cortisol can get blamed for everything and can get, it can say, oh, my cortisol work is working well, but most of the time it gets the blame. And so we're going to learn about cortisol today and what we can do naturally to correct our cortisol level and why it matters. So Dr. Shawn, thank you again for joining us. This is, you bring such great information, and yet it's always so useful that we can just, as soon as we get done listening to the video, we can just take it and like, I can put that into action. I can do that. I can do that. I can do this. I actually have a good answer for my problem. So that's what you give to people. You give them hope and you give them assurance. And we don't have to reach for medications. And that's the other beauty of having your knowledge here with us on this video. So thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, my pleasure. And that really, Annette, is one of my favorite aspects of science. You know, the science is cool just because it's interesting, but when you can apply that science to your life and actually get a benefit, that's when it becomes meaningful to a lot of people.
It does. And, so many people have so many complaints, mental issues, sleep issues, hormonal issues. And the more they start diving in, it's like, wait a minute, cortisol keeps coming up in every. So how do you want to start with this? Like, where do you want to start people in understanding what cortisol is and what we can do about it?
Yeah, well, the easiest way to think of cortisol is that it's the body's primary stress hormone. Whenever we're stressed out, we have lots of stress hormones. And people have probably heard of some of these before. Adrenaline and also called epinephrine. And, when you're stressed out, your sympathetic nervous system activates, and that increases your heart rate. It increases your blood pressure and sends you into fight or flight reaction and things like that. But cortisol, I refer to as the main stress hormone, because that one comes a little bit later in the stress response. It doesn't come in, with the first exposure to stress. When the lion comes charging at you out of the bushes, the first thing that goes is your adrenaline. So you run away or you fight it off. Cortisol comes a little bit later, but it sticks around for a long time. And so what cortisol is doing, it's telling your body to change the way it metabolizes fats and sugars. It's telling you to recover from the stress, from the fight or flight reaction, which for a lot of people it means fueling. The recovery of after you run away is to eat a lot of high calorie foods so that you replenish the energy that you just burned off. So cortisol can persist, and cortisol, if we're exposed to it for a long period of time, it goes from doing good things. The fight or flight reaction can be a good thing if it's short term, but long-term exposure to cortisol becomes catabolic in the body, meaning it breaks down our tissues. So your brain cells break down, your muscle cells break down, your immune system cells break down, your skin breaks down, everything breaks down except for your belly fat. Your belly fat builds up, and probably as a hedge for the future where you might have more stress and you need to have more fuel on board. So cortisol short term isn't bad, but cortisol long term is really, really bad. And unfortunately, most of us in a modern world don't have short-term stress and short-term cortisol exposure. We have long-term stress and long-term cortisol exposure. And that's where the problems start to come in.
It really does. But most people don't realize they're in long-term stress until they get to a critical moment in their health. And it's like, what's going on?
Right.
And then they're like, oh, I'm killing myself with this schedule or with this issue that I'm dealing with, all of that. So now you just listed several ways that our body responds to cortisol being out of balance. Can it be reversed? Can the damage be reversed?
It can. So you have to do a couple things. You have to get your cortisol back down to a normal rhythm. So it's not just about lowering cortisol. It's about restoring cortisol's rhythm. So we actually want to have higher cortisol in the morning and lower cortisol in the evening. So high cortisol in the morning helps us be energetic and face the stresses of the day and get things done. But then low cortisol at night allows our body to recover and our immune system to recover and our body to repair all the damage that has been built up throughout the day. But what a lot of people end up having is they have sort of medium cortisol because we wake up early, we go to bed late, we're under stress, busy, overscheduled all throughout the day, worrying about this, worrying about that. Those are all things that can make our cortisol not be quite high enough in the morning. So what happens is we're tired during the day, but then it doesn't dissipate in the evening. It doesn't get low enough in the evening, so we can't relax enough. We can't recover enough. We can't repair efficiently. And so you do that for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, a couple of years, and then something breaks eventually, like you just alluded to. Then you have one of these stress-induced problems where now you have gut problems. Now you have memory problems. Now you have metabolic problems like diabetes, or you're gaining weight around the midsection. Those are all chronic cortisol exposure problems that don't show up after one day of stress or maybe even 1 month of stress, but they'll show up after a year of stress. They'll show up after a decade of stress for sure. So what people need to realize is that we can lower that cortisol and start the body repair process. But partly it depends on, people always want to know, well, how long is it going to take me to get better? How long is it going to take me to get back to where I was before? It depends on how stressed you were, how long you had the stress, and what tissue did it damage. Is it a tissue that's going to build back quickly, like the gut? Is it a tissue that's going to build back slowly, like a neuron, like a brain cell? So they'll all be solvable, but they might have different time courses, so to speak.
Sometimes, though, if people are having their blood work tested, they can actually have low cortisol in the morning.
Right.
Like it's like almost negligent. It doesn't even
Right.
like want to show up on the scale, but then sleep perfectly well throughout the night. And so, but you were saying not so much today, but it's adaptogenic. When we use different herbs, they're adaptogenic, so it can bring up low cortisol as well as bring down. Is that true?
Right. And that's what I love about natural approaches to cortisol issues, because we can use this category of herbs called adaptogens, which will help you restore that rhythm that I talked about before. So if your cortisol is low, like you're in a situation that some people would refer to as adrenal fatigue, an adaptogen can bring that low cortisol back up to normal. And if you're high because you're stressed out or you're sleep deprived, the very same adaptogen can bring that high cortisol down to normal. And what they can do very uniquely that you don't see with medications is they can restore that rhythm. So you have high cortisol when you need it and low cortisol when you need it, and your body learns how to produce enough and not overproduce.
So without changing your schedule, without giving up all of the stresses that you're under, I know that's an option and that would be a very smart option. But a lot of people just want to continue with what they're doing. They just want to feel better when they do it.
Right.
So obviously, we want to tell them maybe you should revisit your schedule and, change it up a little bit less. But if they don't want to change their schedule, is there a way to just add in these herbs and get a healing effect anyway?
Yes, because and these are the people that we talk to a lot. These are the people who are driven. These are people who are busy. These are people with 25 hours worth of things to do in a 24-hour day, right? Annette, you might be one of those people. I don't want to point fingers, but you get a lot done. So you might be in this category.
It was a personal question, just
asking for a friend, right?
Yeah. So a friend said, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so I'm in that same boat, right? I don't want to put things to the side. I want to figure out a way that I can handle stress better so I can continue doing what I'm doing, or maybe even do more and not have one of those stress-induced problems later on. So if we use things like ashwagandha, rafuma. One of my favorites is called kana. Magnolia bark is a good one. There are so many really good adaptogens that help our body rise to the occasion of stress, but then be able to relax. And so if we take those during our stressful lives, we're able to be resilient, is the way I would say it. Your body will be able to, in a stressful situation, produce the cortisol and the other stress hormones so that you can do whatever you need to do. And then when you're done with that, your body is more sensitive to cortisol now, meaning it can say, okay, I needed cortisol then, but I don't need it now. So I'm going to slow my production of it. And then when I need it again, I'm going to produce it. When I don't need it, I'm going to not produce it. And that regulation is what's really, really important. Those are the people who can thrive in the face of stress versus have the stress-induced problems.
All right, that sounds good. So go ahead, and it sounds to me like you formulated these 4 products: the ashwagandha, the kanna, the magnolia bark, and then I missed one when I wrote it down.
Rafuma would be the last one.
Yeah.
Yep.
So are those in one specific product that people could take as needed?
Yeah, so those are my 4 favorites, and I put them all 4 of them into one product called Mood Plus. And back in the so this product's been on the market now for, I would say, 6 or 7 years, and I'll never forget formulating this product because it started out as 2 separate products. I wanted to formulate one adaptogenic product that would help people with mood, sort of a herbal antidepressant product, and another formula that was going to be an herbal anti-anxiety product. And there were going to be 2 separate products, one for your depression, one for your anxiety. And they were going to work through these adaptogenic effects. And what ended up happening was the more I tried to describe the difference between them, the more it was getting me into trouble, right? We're not supposed to talk about disease because people think it's major depressive disorder. We're not supposed to talk about anxiety because people think we're talking about generalized anxiety disorder, even though we're just talking about the emotions of, being low mood or being tense and anxious. And so I ended up saying, you know what, let's just put them all together in the same formula. It's going to be the hands down best cortisol controlling, mood boosting, anxiety relieving formula out there. And when we launched it was really gratifying. It was a finalist for Botanical of the Year because it had the 4 top cortisol controllers in it. And it's a product I take every single day in that. I mean, I don't know what I'd do without it because it helps me go to the airports and stay up late on deadlines and do Zoom calls and do all the things that I love to do, and do a pretty good job at it, I think.
Well, you do a very good job. So you're so right. Ashwagandha has always been one of my favorite ingredients. So you definitely did well with that. So, well, all right. Well, this has helped tremendously. So it doesn't really matter what your age is. Would you say cortisol is affected in all ages, all categories? I mean, mostly I think about it in women and in menopause or premenopause, whatever. That's where I see it the most because that's who I'm working with the most.
Mm-hmm.
But is it all ages?
Yeah, it really is across the board. It's all ages, it's all genders. It really is all different slices of life, if you will. So by restoring that cortisol rhythm, right? And it's sort of shorthand, I'll say lowering cortisol. That's going to help you if you're a kid or a teenager because it's going to help with your immune system. It's going to help with your mental focus. It's going to help with your ability to be on during the day and off during the evening. That's going to be good for everybody. But as you go through life, if you haven't solved this cortisol overexposure problem, then it's going to be a problem for you in middle age. And then you're going to have different problems in later age. And as men and women start changing their hormones, it's going to be different problems for them. So the earlier you can get a handle on your cortisol issues, the better off you're going to be.
That's a fabulous answer. I appreciate that because that's what people need to know is that these herbs will work with all ages. And does the Mood Plus work on all ages?
Yeah, Mood Plus can work on all ages. One of the issues is those four herbals and in particular, Kanna, Rafuma, Ashwagandha, Magnolia, have never really been studied in children before. And so, I look at that and I go, if it were my kids, right, because I know this area pretty well, I wouldn't have a problem using any of those herbs in my children. I would just use a half a dose. But with sometimes if you have a young kid, you might want to say, well, is there another option? Then you can look at things that have been studied in children like saffron or holy basil or something like that, which might not be quite as potent as cortisol controllers, but they're really, really safe. And if you've got a little kid, then I would say maybe go with one of those because we know they have a much more well-described safety profile.
I agree with that. And we also did that video with you about that kids product. And so I'll link to that down below so people can grab that as like, hey, if you've got young ones, watch the other video that we're going to mention down below about the kids.
Right.
So, all right, Dr. Sean, again, you have filled my mind with the need to go run and take some Mood Plus. Like, these conversations caused me to take a lot of vitamins. It's like, oh, I need to go take that. I haven't taken that yet. I was like, pause, hit, go, don't go take. So I know it probably does the same to you. The more you study it, the more you're like, oh, I'd like that too. So, so thank you very much for this information. It's very beneficial. It's very helpful to know that we don't have to live stressed out. I mean, yes, we do need to lessen our stress in many ways, but realizing there's a natural way that we can actually help adapt ourselves and our body and our daily routine, in case we have to go run and get the air flight that you were talking about, the plane. So thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of the Biblical Nutritionist.
My pleasure.
Well, thanks for letting me share this interview with you with Dr. Sean Talbot. The Mood Plus product, I'll put a link to it down below. It's like the bomb. You can take it a couple times a day as needed. It's all natural. So use it and see how it works for you. There's also Sleep Plus, because many times people just need better sleep, and then that helps reduce the stress level. So I'll put those two products down below, and you can decide if that's something you want to try. In the meantime, remember, God loves you. He's loved you from the moment of conception, and he has a purpose and a plan for your life. Thanks for watching.